Here is an example of one of his barometers. This is a picture of Thomas Savery. Here is an example of Savery's pump. This is an example of the first successful steam pump, which was patented by Thomas Savery in 1698. The patent stated that it could raise water by the impellant of fire. Like I mentioned earlier, the main point of the pump was to lift water out of the mines. Because of that, the pump had a nickname of the miner's friend because of how much it was supposed to help the miners solve the drowned mine issue.
No, this is fine. Watch. Look at this.
Oh, neat. Okay.
Now, watch how fast it happens. As the water goes in, it cools. It's kind of automatic cooling.
Wow. Yeah, I was going to ask if
It's
you
not
had to
even
go all
bubbling. I
around.
thought it would bubble when it sucked it in.
No, and what's happening is there's zero pressure in here, and there's 15 pounds per square inch on that surface. So there's like hundreds of pounds pushing that water, and the only place it has to go is up here.
So that sort of works like blood pressure, doesn't it? You
It's
know how your
related
blood
to that.
pressure?
Yeah, it's
See, I related to art, she related to medicine. That's great.
okay. Now this is the best part here.
Okay. Do I hear air? Oh,
Wow.
neat.
In this model, the metal tank is being used to boil water and then drive out the air. When the tank is cooled, it pumps water from the large jug. In Savery's model, the unit had two boilers that were connected to a pipe. It also had two closed valves. The pump required pressurized steam to force the water to move upwards. The high-pressure steam proved to be dangerous for risks of explosions, so later low-pressure steam could only be used. Here is another image of the pump. With low-pressure steam, it pumped water at about 25 feet. Since the mines were almost 200 feet deep, several pumps were placed at different heights to best raise the water.
There's lots of nice things to look at in the museum as well. Have a look at the 1930s transit.
In case the video was a little confusing, here's a picture that describes every part of his working model. Savery and Newcomen's models of their engines were more similar than they were different. One major similarity was how each engine did not separate the temperature differences in water. A more successful engine would have used one cylinder for heating and cooling, but their engines did not have the capability of separating the two temperatures, making them not as efficient. One way they were too similar was in their make. Savery had his patent from 1698 until 1733, making the design of his engine all his own. However, if you remember, Newcomen made his engine in 1712. Newcomen was forced to join Savery to operate under Savery's patent as ruled by an English patent judge. Savery passed away not too much later in 1715, which allowed his patent to join a stock company called the Proprietors of the Invention for Raising Water by Fire. Newcomen received 20 shares of the company, which equaled to about 1/4 of the company. After 1733, Savery's design became public knowledge.
The first modern steam engine was invented in England in the early 1700s, helping launch the Industrial Revolution. Today, there's a return to steam power. Due to its different configuration and combustion process, a steam engine produces less pollution than a regular internal combustion engine. This steam engine burns fuel in an external combustion chamber. The resulting heat turns water into pressurized steam that enters the cylinders, pushing pistons, turning a crankshaft that powers the drivetrain. Because this engine doesn't burn fuel inside the cylinders like a traditional car engine, it can run on any type or mixture of fuels with fewer emissions. The circular engine block is made of aluminum. Technicians install studs to hold 6 stainless steel cylinders. Due to the constant exposure to steam, all engine parts are made of rust-proof materials. The technicians insert a piston into each cylinder. The piston is aluminum with a heat-resistant carbon cap and glider to isolate it from the cylinder wall. They connect the piston rods to the crankshaft in the center with a specially designed component called a spider bearing. This bearing is designed to modify the piston stroke, producing a smoother rotation of the crankshaft and more power to the engine. Unlike a traditional car engine with cylinders arranged in line, these cylinders are in a radial configuration and therefore equidistant from the center. This prevents the engine from warping under high temperatures. They place a counterbalance over the spider bearing to further smooth the motion of the crankshaft. They install a push rod over each cylinder. It operates a valve which lets steam enter the cylinder and move the piston. They insert the base of each push rod into a guide ring. Then attach the cylinder heads, each of which houses a steam entry valve. They insert the push rod into the valve. Then, to complete the engine assembly, they install the cam, which pushes the push rods as the shaft spins. The factory hooks up every completed engine for a couple of rounds of performance testing. First, a trial run using air pressure to check for leaks and to verify that all components operate correctly. If everything's fine, they then repeat the process with steam pressure. This type of steam engine can power many types of machines, from cars, trucks, and boats to electric generators as we see here. In a vehicle, it doesn't require a transmission because it produces so much rotational power. Now for the heat exchanger, the component which turns water into engine-powering steam. Technicians use a motorized wheel to wind 6 meters of stainless steel tubing into a coil. They bind the coil with steel thread, putting a stitch in between each tube to create a minute gap. That way, when fuel burns in the combustion chamber, the heat can travel over and in between the tubes, heating the water inside faster and more efficiently than if the heat would contact only the coil's top and bottom surfaces. The result? Superheated steam in just 5 seconds. They stack 6 of these coils, one to feed steam to each cylinder. This nest of tubes forms the engine's primary heat exchanger. They test it using any of a number of fuels, even waste fuels which would otherwise be discarded, such as used motor oil and used vegetable oil from restaurant fryers. Virtually anything that burns will do the job. The fuel combusts at low pressure, not at high pressure as in a gas or diesel engine. That means burning fossil fuels to make steam produces far fewer greenhouse gases. And most hydrocarbons burn off completely within the sealed combustion chamber. You never have to refill or top off the water because a condenser cools the steam back into water, which then recirculates. Water is not only the working fluid, it also acts as the engine lubricant, so the steam engine doesn't require motor oil. Besides fuel combustion, this modern steam engine can run on other heat sources, such as solar heat and exhaust heat from furnaces or engines.